Welcome to another episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics. In the room, we've got Liz, Matt, and myself, Liam, and we've joined today virtually by James. He's in via a Teams meeting, but we're going to see what that looks like, I think, with our video editor, how he's going to actually appear on the screen. So that's something to look forward to when we see the
technology makes it possible
by the time.
So we're using technology to see how far we can go with this. But anyway, today, quite topically, we're looking at how AI has been very prominent in the IT sector over the last 3 or 4 months, since probably the turn of the year. Something called Chat GPT was announced. It's like a chat-based AI tool which allows you to ping questions. It's almost like taking Google search or Bing search, and it comes back with a whole more human element to your answers. And then Microsoft have invested a lot of money into this. They've added it into their Bing search to try and give you a slightly different approach. And they've also started to tease what's going to happen to some of the Dynamics products once this AI tool goes into Dynamics. So we thought we'd have a little chat about it. We're not too sure where the conversation's going to go. But
yeah, I'm not sure I can contribute too much to this. About 2 years ago, I went to a session at Directions on AI, and the guy started it by saying, I'm going to explain all of this in words that your grandmother would understand. Well, his grandmother must have been like a nuclear physicist or something, because I spent the next hour. I didn't really understand anything after that statement. So I'm not sure how much I can contribute. But I think it's about taking this technology that's now available and translating it into real business requirements. You know, not the nice to haves or the things that look good in a demo and look a bit gimmicky, but the things that can really improve productivity. In a business, in a small to medium business, rather than a large enterprise business.
Yeah, and they've started doing that, haven't they? It's popped into. I mean, okay, so I've got my marketing hat on, so we probably use it more than most. But even in PowerPoint now, you can put a topic in, and then it'll go away and look at Wikipedia and create your first few slides. It'll have a better design elements for you to choose from. Do you like this design? Do you want us to go away and create something different? Yeah. And it will look at what you've put the text in and have some relevance to the artwork it's bringing in. So they've tried to bring a little bit of, should we say, it is AI, some artificial intelligence of what you've put to give you a better result. So you get a nice looking PowerPoint without having to go into.
And it's quicker. So you've got productivity gain. So some of that, that basic layout thing, it's doing for you, and some of that basic text writing, it's doing for you based on
what you've put in, what you've given it. And Word's the same, and there's a couple of nice little things, whether it's AI, but even in Outlook, where it says, I noticed that you'd had an email yesterday where you responded saying, I'll get back to you or I'll do something. It pops up in your reminders to say, don't forget you did that. So very, very small elements of it coming into our day-to-day life.
Have you got an example of one? He says knowingly.
So yeah, knowingly. I did come up with the idea. I just put into Chat GPT, which is, you can still sign up for it, I think. It got oversubscribed a while back, but you can go there now, sign up for an account. So I just put, give me a podcast script about how Dynamics can use Chat GPT. And it does then give you, and this is where it's probably changed, rather than...
We can go now.
We can all go now. I'll just read it out for next time. I need one other person to be the guest. But it does, I think what Chat GPT's done is this idea that it gives a human element. So where you'd have maybe put that into Google, you'd have had a lot of facts come back. Now it gives it that nice... It gives me a script.
Conversational, doesn't it? It's like conversational language rather than just bullet point.
Yeah, it's that kind of find rather than search.
Yeah, and we've been using it in marketing for if we wanted to, even if I did something very, very high level that said, give us a mailer to send out to people that might be interested in using Business Central, without putting any more information in, it will go away. It'll come back and tell you a very basic, high level what Business Central is. It's an EIP platform, small to mid-sized businesses. If then you add a little bit extra content, so what does this mean for the distribution sector that we focus in? It will go away and bring some of that functionality gains you get. And add that into the mailer, and it'll do it very nice, all the grammatically correct, all those little things. And we've definitely found that as a kickoff or a starter for 10, it's a great way to have a very basic document, or more than basic, and then we can add to that with our industry knowledge or our specialisation, or you take what they've given you and you give it. But it gives you the first 50-60% of what you're looking for, and it gives it you in 10 seconds. And
which again is about
efficiency
saving some time. Yeah. But also allowing you to do it in business appropriate language, So, or in a different language.
It's contextual, isn't it? You can choose.
You can choose the
in
tone,
the style, tone,
do
language.
Yeah, formal, informal,
adventurous,
language,
aggressive. Yeah. You can even ask it to
aggressive.
There's loads of little examples like that, and you can put things like, and I want a quote in from somebody inspirational because you're trying to do a talk to that's going to be, and it will pick something that's from Nelson Mandela or somebody else that said something, and it will incorporate it, and it will have some intelligence around the quote it picks is in relation to what you've put, which sounds really weird and dumb, and then you see the result, you think actually that works quite well. So from
if you're sending it to new business and people that you don't have a relationship with, then that's probably okay. But if you're looking at existing customers, they should probably. I don't know. Do you think that they would read it and go, well, Liz hasn't written that?
Well, this is where I think we're seeing it in marketing. If everyone put the same thing in that, everyone's going to be sending the same mailers. But in terms of giving you a structure and a thought, I was looking for a title for something. We were trying to come up with a new event, and we put all the details and said to come up with some titles, and it came up with 5 or 6 different titles.
So
like
we're
really
saying now
quickly.
we don't need a sales and marketing team anymore.
No, what you need is that we can now focus on those really important things.
Okay.
But yeah, Matt mentioned this script, so straight away it goes through the introduction, so it builds that human element around, hi, I'd introduce perhaps James or you guys as the experts on dynamics. And it gives you everything you want to do, but it then getting to the crux of what the question was, it says, it tells you what Dynamics is. It's a suite of enterprise resource planning tools and customer relationships. And then it says, well, can you give me an example of how Microsoft Dynamics uses Chat GPT to improve customer service? And it gives me the script. Well, let's say a customer contacts a company that uses Microsoft Dynamics for customer service. The customer could interact with the bot that uses Chat GPT to process their request. The bot will use natural language processing to understand the customer's message and generate an appropriate response. If the customer's request is complex, requires further assistance, it will escalate the issue to a live customer service representative. All standard stuff. But
it's just come back with all of that, though, for you.
It's come up with all that, and it came back within seconds, and then
but
it carries
written
on.
in a way that would be appropriate to read for a podcast, as opposed to just a list of facts.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you a little bit more. And so again, if we wanted to build a structure for the podcast, it wouldn't be a script. We don't do it like that. But you've got maybe 3 or 4 points.
Yeah, we've never worked off a script, so I think that's probably quite clear.
Even a structure.
I mean, you look at it and you say, how will a typical Tecman customer use this technology? How will they build it in? And I think, obviously, a lot of our business is around Business Central. That's an ERP system. It's a system of record. Your auditor's going to get a bit shaky if your transactions start having a Chat GPT element to them, because they're supposed to be factual what's happened rather than what somebody presents as what's happened. So, where does this fit in? And I know Microsoft they launched a video just last week saying, okay, we'll take the information from the item card and we'll produce a long description, extended description, where they'll build in things like the attribute values and so on to turn
publish
that
on e-commerce,
a few
mainly,
sentences.
isn't it? So it's to make a product sound sexy, ready for it to go onto the e-commerce site.
So, I think that there is a value of that to a element of our customer base. But you look at the element of our customer base that have got an online store, and it's still, probably less than 50%. Because actually far more businesses sell to repeat accounts. So they open an account and then they just repeat sell into that account, and they don't need to describe the product in the same way. That's great if you're an e-commerce business that's selling to consumers.
Yeah.
But if you're selling business to business, it's probably, yes, it's useful, but it's not the same level of use. So we're, thinking around across the Business Central piece, and I think, the team are looking for examples of where this might be useful. I mean, your Business Central system does communicate, so the emails that come out of Business Central currently are pretty flat. Attached is your invoice number XYZ. Thank you for your business. Regards, and that's about it. That when you're sending emails around, so you could make more personalised emails. But the other idea that I had was that, you have a more personalized experience. So when you go to Business Central, you have something called personalization, where you can say, I add fields, remove fields, etc. And you're doing that at global scale. So saying I want to turn the lot number on every page, just asking it to do that, and it goes off and processes that and makes sure that every page is set up for lot numbers. That can be a significant piece of work. And so you could personalize the way that the interface to the Business Central system works.
Is that AI or just coding though?
Well, you could do it by coding, but there's a lot of actually fairly routine coding to go and set the property to visible for every single page that it appears on, and potentially that could go find out. I don't think it's heartless, but I think it's struggling to find. I mean, you look at as Liam kind of points out, you look at the sales app, DC65 sales engagement and customer service, much more frequently you're logging a case and then sending an email regarding what the case is and what the next step is. And it can make that email look a lot nicer, a lot prettier, explain a lot more than a customer service agent is going to sit there and type out, or have time to type out if they're going to hit their case closure targets. So that's there. I think marketing, the email, the marketing app, where it can send an email which is very targeted on the customer. So I had one from Mercedes yesterday that was completely wrong, because they told me that my PCP scheme was up in a few days, in a few months, and that the balloon payment of my car would be due. Now actually, if they looked at their CRM system and sent that email out, they should know that I didn't actually do it on a PCP scheme. So it's completely they made an assumption, probably for speed, that actually made them look, the local Mercedes dealer, slightly idiotic and just wrong. And that isn't going to make me buy another car from them, is it? So you can prevent kind of errors by getting into the personalization level for marketing. But coming back to the ERP system, I think it's much harder to find a use case for where this I think there's other aspects of AI which are going to have a much bigger impact in future.
Yeah, the next level, the combination of the AI and the business intelligence, isn't it?
You're right about you can code certain things. You mentioned there, James, an example of a marketing mail. That will always, the current Chat GPT and integration with Dynamics on the sales side, it will look at the email that you're replying to. So it will pick out maybe a product name. If someone said, I'm really interested in something that we're selling, if James's example of a car, it'll pick that car if they've put that in the email, and it will then go away and find more information about it. So it will make the email more relevant, rather than just a bit of coding, which might not have the ability to work out exactly what that is. So, and it's still really early stages, but it's coming.
And I think the where this will lead into, and the benefits that we'll then start to see in ERP is interrogating the data and understanding the data, and it's a private set of data for the customer, probably then also linked to some external data. But things like the old question, if you're if you're a manufacturer or even a distributor, and you've got purchase orders that are being updated and they're late, which customers do I need to go and ring? Now that's not an easy answer in BC now. Just kind of simple questions. What do I need to do?
Yeah, so
today?
not necessarily based on what they've ordered, but also what they may order.
Exactly. Yeah,
so if there's going to be a supply problem,
predict
who might order what.
Yeah.
To be able to then share that information, and,
or even
let people know. Or,
if you're a trader and you've got excess stock available, who do you go and ring to try and sell it to?
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's that user interface, because at the moment, to successfully operate something like Business Central, you've got to go and click. You've got to open quite a few lists at best, and apply quite a few views, so filter it down to find this, see if there's any, and quite a lot of the time you're going in to see whether there's any late orders, and there aren't, and so that's great. You move on to the next thing, and almost the process of of operating BC correctly is correctly ticking off and making sure any outstanding tasks are done. I think if BC can present to you in the right priority, looking at what you've done historically, what you've done first historically, it can then say, well, given based on your previous activity history, this is what you prioritize. Therefore, this is what you need to see first and deal with first. Actually, you're taking a huge amount of time out of the user's day, because rather than having them spend time finding what they need to do, it's just presented what they need to do, and they're still in control of the decision-making process. I think the idea that AI, and I think it's going to be a while before it makes the decisions in any particular set of circumstances, because there are so many external factors. Will AI be able to listen to that conversation that I overheard across the office and know that customer might be buying that stock?
Yes, probably.
Yeah, don't say that to Siri or Alexa, because they'll no doubt respond yes.
But but that's the kind of and how seriously should that conversation be factored in? So the first thing is, right, what do we need to do, and in what order? And I think the current interface is going to evolve massively, I would see, over the next 10 years, to be from a thing where you go and click on what you want to do to something that says, this is what you should be doing first.
Yeah. But of course, it's only as good as the data.
As with anything in life, isn't it? And that's one of the hang-ups that you've got with even on the Chat GPT. It's not connected particularly to the internet, so it dates very quickly. If there was something happening right now in the world, and you could send something out and very but
even things like customer and supplier data, contact data, that the technology is there now to go and trawl LinkedIn and maintain that quality of data automatically, company's house and various other sources, postcode lookups, you bring all that together, and there's a chunk of the quality of data that can just almost be self-sufficient.
Okay. But what about from I've seen a lot of stuff.
There is, Matt, but don't you think the data quality issue is that a lot of our customers are, you ask them, how's your data quality, and they'll go 98% right. The problem is they don't know which 2% is wrong. Okay, so then you get into a problem with, if you're using pattern recognition, so a large part of AI is just pattern recognition.
Yeah.
At heart of saying, right, this is the set of circumstances that's occurred 42 times, therefore this is the 43rd time logically it's going to occur. But there'll be I think especially in small to medium-sized enterprise, there's a lot of apprehension that some data being wrong, some unit of measure being wrong on some transaction at some point could really skew, and that might make decisions that cost them a lot of money.
Couldn't it? If you're go on.
The ironic thing is, enterprise data, in my experience, is way worse than SMB data. You go to your average corporate, Microsoft, not talking about you at all, and their data from one end of the organization to the other, you can ask for the same statistic and get 42 different answers.
But the processes will be the same. How they process transactions will be the same. I think sometimes with our customers, they will sometimes process a transaction in a different way. So, for example, they'll post a credit note direct to the GL because it's the quickest, easiest way of getting it. But that can really skew your figures. So if you're relying on that for things like predicting sales orders, you could get big variances which aren't real, or you miss.
Well, the data for AI has got to be complete, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the word.
So you've got to be consistent in the way that you process transactions.
Well, I think it's
whereas a human will look at it and say there's 10% of that's missing because I did that credit note to the GL.
Yeah, exactly.
Will AI know about that? And I guess eventually it might get so that it's clever enough to say, well, hang on.
Yeah.
It will, as long as it's entered consistently. I think as long as it's consistent, it can pick up the pattern But if it's inconsistent, that's where you're going to get.
I mean, I think it'll drive a certain amount of people understanding that they have to get the quality better, because of the results and the feedback is so beneficial to them.
Yeah, I think that's been the case with BI, hasn't it? People have been through that learning curve over the last 3 years with BI, trying to produce Power BI dashboards and getting, absolute rubbish, or not being able to balance it to what their accounts are saying.
It's a great starting point to then go and get the data right, isn't
I
it?
think so, yeah.
Build the report, see how
so.
bad it is, and then go and fix the data.
I think so.
Controversially, I'd say, if you look at the really successful customers and the ones that are struggling, the difference is a lot of them is data quality. I think companies that have their data really well sorted generally know where the problems are and are able to engineer them out and go through it. I think the companies that aren't so structured are the ones that tend to end up struggling sooner or later, because they don't see the problems that the business has until too late. And certainly as business, once you get into a medium-sized business, understanding it from gut feel is as we know is much tougher. You have to rely on the statistics more, and if the statistics aren't right, then you're in difficulty. But coming back to the AI thing, I think it is going to make a substantial difference. I think you'd be very brave to say where it will be in 10 years' time, because I think that's where there's an awful lot of very intelligent people working very hard to surprise us. And you will see these big leap forwards like Chat GPT in a specific area. But, the idea, the stories that you've seen in the press about we're all going to be made redundant by Chat GPT, I think jobs will evolve. And I think, some of you've seen computing since the days when it was first introduced. What it's done, it's taken the repetitive and laborious piece of routine out of roles. When I started, I was 30 years ago, I was doing the monthly sales statements were something that the typing pool had to sit there for 2 days a month and type up from the ledgers. And I came in with a computer system and we could just push a button and out they came in 20 minutes. And you put them in a post and sent them. And then eventually it went on to email, and that sort of evolution. So I think AI will do that typing pool, a lot of them then moved on and their jobs became actually more interesting because they're more decision making and more involved in actual what the process should be rather than routine doing the process itself. So I don't see in the mid-market anyway an awful lot of people being put out of work by this. What I do think is that it's going to take some of the stuff that it's going to make them more effective, more productive, and it's going to take some of the laborious stuff that they actually don't like doing away from them.
Yeah, 100%. Just one example I saw that I loved was where it takes the meeting minutes. So if you're on a Teams call,
okay,
it can write some minutes, which everybody hates doing. Most people miss big chunks. When you used to write them, you'd go back and you couldn't even read your own writing to work out what you'd done. It takes the meeting minute, but then uses AI to highlight the actions and the important points, and potentially to then raise an escalation or to trigger another action. And I thought that was really, really good. Having worked with the account managers recently on trying to put together these account plans and trying to get people to record meeting minutes and things, and the differing levels that you get and what people understand and don't understand as a meeting goes through. I thought that was really good, and that's a really good example of where you're taking a task that's laborious and quite often ineffective and just making it really easy. So I really like
consistent.
That. Yeah.
I mean, the quality is consistent if you're doing it like that, whereas, as you say, you get varying levels of consistency.
Even
if different people are doing
my
it.
swear words.
There's a good example of AI actually built into PowerPoint. If you go in and you want to run through your presentation, and it'll critique you as you're going. So it'll say, you're speaking too fast. You've used that phrase 5 or 6 times. You're just repeating what's on the slide. So in terms of actually that's a really, like you've given a good example real time. I found that useful. If you run through a deck before you present, that's really good to say, crumbs, I've used crumbs 3 times or whatever, or I am reading off that. It just makes you think, and it gives you a score at the end of what you could do and how to improve your presentation. So it is coming into lots of it. It's coming into Teams, like Liz said, allegedly, that, because obviously this is like a chat bot, if somebody pinged you a chat on Teams, it'll answer for you in a way that looking at your past history, you would do. Might not blank out your swear words there. So,
that's only to you, Liam.
Well, I need to put them in for Liz, hadn't it?
I think it's one of those things. It's going to improve, isn't it?
No, it adds the swear words in my. For the chat bot for me, it adds it so that it sounds like it's really from me. just drop the F-bomb in there, then you'll know it's from Liz.
It'll asterisk a few letters out, just to not get caught by HR. So I think I'd always advise anyone to go and have a play with it. It's free to go and have a little play with it at the moment, and it's just have a mess around. It will come into the products, there's no doubt. And there's some good videos I'm sure we can put in the content and the comments here around what you can look at what they're doing already. But anybody want anything to just say anything else before we conclude?
Decide what it's used for.
Why don't you let the
script
close it?
Well, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for joining us, James, Liz, Matt, and it was great to have you on the show. You now will have to say thanks for having me, Liam. It was a pleasure.
You didn't put a click to subscribe in.
Yeah, we should be doing the subscribe bit, but I won't today. But yeah, that's it really, I think, for today. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all on the next episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics.